Phase 4. Connecting the evidence. Chapter 12. Looking for the pattern. Consulting focus. What is the evidence telling us? The conference room looked different than it had only a few days earlier. Instead of notebooks filled with observations, the consultants now had reports, interview notes, financial summaries, operational metrics, customer feedback, and technology dashboards spread across the table. Several consultants had begun arranging related documents into small groups, using sticky notes and colored markers to identify recurring themes and possible connections. Individually, each document answered a specific question. Together, they began telling a much larger story. Emma welcomed the team back and reminded them that collecting information was only the beginning of the consulting process.
The goal isn't to collect the most evidence. It's to understand what the evidence is telling us.
She encouraged the consultants to resist the temptation to move immediately to recommendations. Effective consultants first looked for patterns, relationships, and connections across multiple sources of information. A single report might identify a problem, but meaningful recommendations required understanding how issues in one area influence performance throughout the organization. As the discussion continued, recurring themes began to emerge. Hiring challenges affected production capacity, production influenced customer experience, technology supported decision-making but depended on accurate information, financial performance reflected decisions made across every department. The consultants recognized that no recommendation could be evaluated in isolation because every decision would create consequences elsewhere in the business. Emma looked around the room as the consultants began connecting ideas from different reports.
Now you're starting to see the bigger picture.
The consultants began organizing the evidence into broader themes, preparing to evaluate not only what was happening within PAWfect Crate Company, but also why it was happening and what the organization should do next. Chapter 13. Weighing the trade-offs. Consulting focus. What choices will create the greatest long-term value? By the second afternoon of analysis, the consultants had moved beyond identifying issues and began evaluating possible responses. The conference room whiteboard now displayed several possible recommendations, with arrows connecting related ideas and notes listing potential benefits, costs, and risks beside each option. Every opportunity offered potential benefits, but every recommendation also involved costs, risks, or trade-offs. Expanding production could increase revenue, yet it might also require additional hiring, investments in technology, and changes to existing processes. David reminded the team that leadership decisions rarely involve choosing between a good option and a bad one.
Most important decisions involve choosing between several reasonable options. The question is, which one creates the greatest long-term value?
Rather than debating personal opinions, the consultants evaluated each alternative using the evidence they had gathered throughout the engagement. They considered how every recommendation would affect employees, customers, operations, technology, and financial performance. The discussion reinforced an important consulting principle. Recommendations should not solve one problem by creating another. As each alternative was considered, the same question continued to surface. What evidence supports this recommendation? The habit changed the tone of the discussion. Opinions gave way to analysis, and the consultants became increasingly confident that their conclusions reflected the evidence rather than personal preference. Consultant File Review. Internal Communication. Review. Section H. Internal Communication. Purpose. Evaluate how effectively information is communicated and coordinated across PAWfect to support continued growth. This file provides evidence related to leadership communication practices, cross-functional communication processes, employee communication methods, communication challenges and improvement opportunities. Effective communication ensures that leaders and employees have the timely, accurate information needed to support decision-making, coordination, and execution. Use this evidence to assess communication strengths, identify coordination challenges, and recommend improvements that support successful expansion. Chapter 14: Building the Business Case. Consulting focus: how do we transform evidence into recommendations? With the analysis nearing completion, the consultants turned their attention to organizing their findings into a clear and persuasive business case. Laptops, draft presentation outlines, and marked-up recommendation summaries covered the conference table as team members refined key points and compared supporting evidence. They understood that effective recommendations required more than identifying problems. Leaders needed practical solutions supported by evidence, realistic implementation considerations, and a clear explanation of the expected impact. Emma reminded the team that a recommendation was only as valuable as its ability to help leaders make informed decisions.
Evidence explains why change is needed. Recommendations explain what should happen next.
The consultants organized their findings into a small number of strategic priorities. Some recommendations focused on preparing employees for growth, others addressed operational capacity, technology improvements, financial planning, and protecting the customer experience. Although each recommendation addressed a different aspect of the organization, together they reflected a single objective: helping PAWfect Crate Company grow without losing the qualities that had made it successful. Before concluding the day's work, Emma offered one final reminder.
The strongest recommendations are clear, practical, and supported by evidence.
The consultants reviewed their work one final time. They had gathered evidence, identified patterns, evaluated alternatives, and developed recommendations. One important step remained. They now had to communicate their findings in a way that would help the leadership team make confident decisions about the company's future. That wraps up Phase 4. When you are ready, join me in Phase 5. I'll see you there.